Let's see, today is Tuesday and we're doing a normal class. I'm going to try to fit a whole bunch of stuff in an hour and 15 today because I want to make sure you have enough information or as much as I can give you prior to the first 5 levels of Blade being due, which is a week from today if you ignore the fall break. And I'm trying not to have you work over fall break, so I'm apportioning our time as if that week didn't exist. You're of course free to work that week, and I'll answer Slack and so forth, and I won't disappear, but I'm trying not to burden you with work over that time. So, first order of business, you need to sign up for this. I put it on Slack. 7 people so far out of 17 have signed up, and those 7 people are now listed here on our score page. This gives you a perm number. You can't submit the homework solutions without a perm number. And so please do that if you haven't already. And I check this once a day or so, and I'll update the scores page and make sure that you should then make sure that whenever you submit a solution for any of the various levels that you show up here as getting credit for the solution you submitted. Are there any questions about this perm number business? Okay. I asked it to be done by today, and like I said, less than half the class has done it, so please do that. Oh, I mean, it hurts you if you don't. Second thing, we're having a quiz 2 days from today, on Thursday. The quiz is hard and covers basically the Razor type stuff. I mean, you're certainly responsible for knowing like port forwarding and things like that. It comes into play, but focus is on the sort of buffer overflow stuff that you did on Razor, and format strings and race conditions and other kinds of things that were things you saw on Razor. So there won't be any web-based questions on the quiz on Thursday. Any questions about the quiz? Okay. In order to give you as much as I can before the break so that you can work on these levels, I'm going to skip around a bit on the slides. So today I want to finish up the last set of slides that we're talking about. In particular, I want to talk about CGI scripts. So I'm going to be skipping some stuff. This is back on deck 12, which is where we left off last week. And this slide is supposed to talk about sort of protocols we've talked about so far, client-side and server-side components, static content, HTML, CSS, you know what that means? Other stuff that runs on the browser side, JavaScript and Ajax, we're going to talk about extensively, both today probably. ActiveX and Flash and other RA-rich information access tools. We're not going to talk about Java applets. There is a Java level on Blade, but it's the last level. We won't talk about today. And then on the server side, static files, PHP, which we'll talk about more today. And then we won't get into Visual Basic at all. Python, Perl, and Ruby, I'll talk about a little bit. Python, probably today. Native code, it's rare that you see native, what do I mean by native code? Yeah, a compiled C or some kind of compiled program into object code, into executable. You don't usually see that on the server side. ASP.NET, that's part of .NET, and it's a Microsoft stack. Java, SQL. What's SQL?
SQL, it's querying databases.
Yeah, it's a language to query a database. It's pronounced SQL oftentimes. We're going to go through some of that just so that we understand the basics of SQL so we can do SQL injections down the line. All right, so Apache is the most commonly used web server out there. I have a whole bunch of slides here that I'm not going to go through, but basically it opens port 80 and then serves up various document routes according to tags that are called virtual servers. So you can have a bunch of different websites on one Apache server. We only have one on Blade, and it serves port 80, and there's a default page that just is high on the default page. And then the interesting part, of course, is under each user's page, where the users are twiddle level 1 through level 10. I have a whole bunch of slides here about how modules work and so forth. basically, the most important part of this is the following. You can have PHP support in Apache in two ways. One is you can install a PHP module. The module would then become integrated into Apache, and when Apache, the server, opens up a PHP file, it sees the PHP and it executes it as part of the Apache executable itself. So it's integrated into the server. You don't have to fork and run a separate interpreter. That's the most efficient way. That's the most common way. However, one drawback on a machine that has multiple users, as Blade does, because remember level 1, 2, 3, 4, those are different users. The disadvantage is that PHP is going to be running as part of Apache, and Apache, remember, every process has a user and a group, right? And an effective user and effective group. What is the user that owns the process for Apache? Sometimes it's called nobody. That was back in the 1.3 days. These days I think it's called data, but it's some generic user. It's not you, it's not me, and it's not root, God forbid, right? It's running as some user whose only purpose really is to run the Apache web server. Okay, so that means that if you want to make a website, then you have to make all of your web pages readable by this user data, so it can read your web pages and render them or ship them out so that they can be rendered by the other site's browser. If Alex makes a page that's readable, writable, and executable only by Alex and no one else, then that's good for security because I can't see his pages and you can't see his pages, but neither can the web server, so it can't serve up his pages. He's got to open it up to everyone, at least to data, which there is no special permissions flag in Linux to say, open it up only to this user, but to no one else. There's no way to do that, right? I mean, you can use groups and so forth. Bless you. So this presents some problems on a shared environment, a shared host, because now I can see Alex's pages and so forth. And so another way to do this, and the way that it's done on Blade, is to use what's called CGIs. So let's see if I have a slide where I can talk about CGIs. Yeah.
Apache itself, is it written in Python or?
Apache is C.
Is C? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's an open source, so you can go and browse the source code and so forth. But it's a C program that can dynamically install other C programs within it. And so mod_PHP, let's see. If I have a slide on this, I don't know if I do. So mod under PHP 7, which is the module that we would run on the current version of Apache. So Apache 2.4 is what's running on Blade, and that's the latest version of Apache. And the bunch of modules that you can run, one is mod under userdir. So that is installed on the current Apache, and what that means is that if that module is installed, then people on the browser side who type in whatever URL to get to the Apache server under discussion, /twiddle Anya, will go to her home directory, where twiddle Anya means use the bash expansion of that username, so it's /home/Anya or whatever, and then go to some default directory, and the way Apache usually comes is with public_HTML. You can configure that any way you want. But for userdir, for this module, it by default will go to that person's directory /public_HTML and look in that directory for, once again, a configurable default, but usually index.html, index.php. There's a list of things it looks for in order. The first one's index.html, then index.php, and then there are a few others that it looks for that it will ship by default as the root document for that user. This allows a bunch of different websites to be hosted in various people's home directories. By default, this is not there. You have to install this module to enable it. So I've installed this module so that each of you can have your own website. So you could go on Blade right now and start a website and say, hey mom, go look at this, which mom's gonna have a hard time because Blade's on a private IP, but whatever, right? But you can all have your own private website that you create under this syntax, okay? If I had installed this, which I don't install, then PHP will run as part of Apache. And you can have PHP. So that means if you put PHP tags in the website that you created, it'll automatically get interpreted by a PHP interpreter on the server side. The client will never see this PHP source code, only the output of that source code. Now, another way to do this, and the way that it is done on Blade, is with mod CGI. So CGI stands for Common Gateway Interface. It's actually the old and original way of providing server-side scripting. And it provides not only for PHP scripts to run, but for any scripts to run. So you can run Python and Perl and Bash scripts in native code and anything you want. What will happen is that when you install this, which I have on Blade, it goes into a separate subdirectory under public_HTML called CGI-bin. Okay, so there's a subdirectory there that if any files are referenced within that subdirectory, it invokes this module. And this module says, take that file and run it as a script. So what it's going to do is it's going to hand it off to Bash in a forked subprocess, and it's going to look, as usual, at the first line that says shebang, blah, 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 Python, shebang, blah, 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 Perl, shebang, blah, 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 PHP. When I say blah, 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 I mean wherever that interpreter lives. So you can have PHP, Python, Perl, Ruby, Fortran, whatever it is, whatever, Bash, whatever interpreter you want. And then the body of that script, as usual, will be in the language indicated by that interpreter. And what's the expected output of the script? Some HTML, right? It spits out HTML. And PHP is built to spit out HTML. That's its main goal in life. Bash is not. Python and Perl not either, but they have some support for helping you do it more easily if you're using them as CGIs. Okay. The nice thing about using CGI, it's less efficient because you're forking. Separate process to run the interpreter and then taking the output back into Apache and then shipping it out to the user. But it is possible by running, see if I have it here, another module. I don't know if I list it. Do you see SU exec? I don't see it. Ah, okay. All right. So, LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, but sometimes P is Perl or Python instead. This is a server-side stack. Stack just means a bunch of crap, a load of code. Running Linux with Apache as your web server, MySQL as your SQL database, and then PHP as your server-side language. And just as I just said, you can do this either as a module, in other words, PHP either as a module, meaning it's part of Apache, or it can be done as CGI, as I just said. And the nice thing about doing it as a CGI is you can run this other module called SU exec. 35 times slower, you're welcome. But what it means is that when the script runs in CGI bin, it runs as you. Okay? So it SUs over to your account. That means it can now see all of the files in your account, even if your files are writable only by you. And that can lock it off from everybody else on the machine. So in the case of a shared host, where a bunch of users are together on one machine, this is a great way of isolating each user individually, but still allowing scripts to be able to run for each of you, without being able to cross-contaminate. Have you seen this before? You ever run sudo and it says you're not in the sudoers file, this incident will be reported? Yes. And then someone says, hey, who does this report to? You You know, I've never checked. Apparently you go on the naughty list. Christmas, yeah. All right, so on Blade, like I said, the scripts are gonna run as the user. So when I run a script in the CGI bin of level 2, who's the user? Level 2, because that's a user on the machine. Okay? So let's just test this real quick. So if I want to, get to the web server on Blade, what should I do? SH minus capital L, open a port on localhost on my Mac, and then point my browser at localhost to that port. So I have a script and I have an alias, which I highly recommend you do as well. And my alias does this for me so that I can just type it in real quick, and it's like that. Sorry. So Blade 8099, I think I already have it open because I have it on another window. So SSH Blade, that doesn't actually SSH to Blade, it just goes to the right IP address, so I still need the -P2015. Minus LJR Black, that's in case I'm executing this alias as root. It'll correct to the correct login name. And then here's my -L to open the local port 8099. And once I have that, I can just go localhost 8099, and I should get, oops, a little one. I should get the default page, and here is my amazing homepage on Blade. So this is TwiddleJR Black, so this is my homepage on Blade. See what user CGI bin is running as, click this. What am I doing here? I want to see what the user ID is of a CGI bin. What's a CGI bin? Just seeing if you're awake.
The place scripts to be executed.
Okay, this is where scripts are to be executed in a separate home directory. So I click this. So let's go see what I'm up to here. So if I want to see the server-side portion of this amazing website on Blade, where do I look?
Under CGI.
Under CGI bin, under, I'm home already, public HTML. I'm not on, oh, I didn't actually go to Blade. So I think that port's already open, so I'm just going to do a regular Blade login. So public HTML, apparently I have some other pages there, but the amazing page is this one, right? So see what user CGI bin is running as, click this, and this goes to some script in CGI bin called phptest.php. Okay, let's go take a look at that. So I must have a directory called CGI bin here. And this does not have to be visible to the world. This can be visible just to the web server. And in fact, on Blade challenges, usually, I think almost always, the PHP is invisible to you. It's only visible to level 3, level 4, the user itself. phptest.php, this is what's going to run when I click it. And what interpreter is being run? PHP. So PHP comes as a plain interpreter for people who want to just write their data structures homework in PHP. Why would you do that? But you can. There's like a vanilla PHP interpreter. I think it's run like this. Yeah, that didn't work, but whatever. You can run just raw PHP. There's a special PHP interpreter that's meant for CGI. That's a separate one. That one automatically generates headers for you, so that's kind of nice. And then there's a third one that's meant to be run in a context related to Apache modules. Yeah, I don't remember. There's a third one. Anyway, so the one we're running here is the one that's appropriate for CGI, which makes sense because this is a CGI script. This entire page is just Print shell exec. What do you think shell exec does?
Spawn a shell.
Spawn a shell and then run this command in the shell. If this is a little dangerous to have turned on, because if someone can inject PHP into a form and get it to run on the back end, then they can run shell commands on the back end, which, as you know, can wreak all kinds of havoc. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to click that button, and it's going to run this as who am I, which may print www data if su exec is not installed, or it should print JR black if it is installed and working. So let's try it. Okay, so that script ran as me. That's good. That means that level 1 runs as level 1, level 2 runs as level 2. That's important when you're doing the homework, when you're doing the challenges. All right, and it explains why when I go to level 1's home directory, and then I go to public HTML, I can see index.html, but when I go to CGI bin, I can't see anything. But the web server will be running as level 1, and it can read this directory because the directory is owned by level 1. So level 1 has full permissions. We kind of know what's in this directory based on the index.html, because it's going to go here and run this, right? So I know that there's something called verify.js. So can I cat it? No. Why not? Because it's read-write and executable only for owner. So the web server can do it because it's running as level 1. But I can't, as JR Black, I can't see this file. Something's weird here. What's weird? That's a really terrible question, but answer it anyway. Don't say like my hair or something, just the computer. Do you have any idea what I mean when I say tell me what's weird? Or is that just a useless question?
I think some refinements would be nice.
To this website or to my question?
To your question.
Darn it. Okay. What's .js usually mean?
JavaScript.
JavaScript. What do you usually do with JavaScript?
Serve it to the client.
Serve it to the client, and then the client's going to run it, right? What's usually in the CGI bin?
Server-side script.
Server-side scripts. What the hell is JavaScript doing in a server-side script directory? That makes no sense. JavaScript is not run on the server side and then the output of it is served up, right?
I mean, unless you're running Node.js.
Yeah.
Then would you have JavaScript in a CGI bin though?
I mean, does it really matter? I mean, as long as the HTML has write access to where the script is, it doesn't matter where the script is hosted. So, I mean, you can put under /temp/ this will be dead in 24 hours / verify.js.
Right, but CGI bin is a special magical subdirectory where when the web server goes to serve stuff out of that subdirectory, it's going to run it as a script. And if you just take plain old JavaScript and run it as under bash, it's just going to barf, right? So this has to be, even though it's got a .js extension, this has to be Python, Perl, PHP, or bash or something that can be run. Can I, without giving away the homework answer, can I do this? Let's see. I'll just show you a tiny taste of this thing. Oh, I need, Okay, so what is .js? It's a Python script named .js. So what's going to happen? It's going to CGI bin, right? So Apache's going to go, okay, you're in CGI bin. I don't care what your extension is. I'm going to run you as a script. And it's going to see this and say, okay, it's a Python script, and the rest of this file is going to be run as Python. What's going to be the output? Some JavaScript. All right. So those of you who've played with level 1, and I hope that's everyone by now, know that if you just fetch this file directly, it serves up like, sorry, I don't know. It serves up some alert that just says, anybody know?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay. If you request this thing directly,
Function verify form alert, not really.
it pops up an alert, not really, right? So it somehow senses that you're fetching this thing directly. So the Python is looking at who's calling it and going, oh, if you're calling this file directly, I'm going to give you some JavaScript that pops up a window that says not really. But if you do it through the form, level 1 is a form, right? If you do it this way and then hit verify, then it's going to say wrong password, or it's going to say right password if you get the user and the password correct. And that means that that .js is producing different JavaScript depending on how it's called. Weird. That said, it's not that bad to get the username and the password. Okay. All right. So nobody in their right mind would ever write a web page like that, but I did. But the highlight there is just level 1 runs as level 1. And what do you think it could be looking at? You're never going to see, wait, can you see, is there a trick to see the verified.js source code?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Should I say?
I guess so. Is there,
In Chrome Inspect, you can see that whatever JavaScript is served by, you can see it in the source.
Attached to the DOM, right?
right, but you're still seeing the output of the Python.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm asking, can you see the Python source?
No. we can
No.
do that.
Okay. So what do you think the Python source is doing to serve back one version of JavaScript versus another?
Based on the referrer.
Based on the referrer. That's one way to do it. Remember what referrer is? I mentioned it last time. It mentions what is the referring page. So if it came from the level 1 index.html, it's going to have a different referrer than if you directly request it by typing in verify.js. Okay, that's level 1. Hopefully that's enough to get you going. Any questions?
I think some of the permissions might not be right for level 3
Yeah.
on some
really?
of those files. Yeah.
Okay, I can check that. I'll check it after class. All right, so I want to do a couple more things. Let me think.
Yeah, not supposed to see it.
I'm afraid of what that's going to say. I want to also talk about, let me talk about Burp real quick. Okay, so Burp is, I mentioned it before, it's a proxy written in Java, and it's on Kali by default. I'm running it directly on my Mac, so I'm going to do it that way. And it does all kinds of stuff. It can launch attacks for you, it can act as a proxy, it can act as a buzzer. I'm only going to use it as a proxy in this class. So what's going to happen is I'm going to set my browser to use Burp as a proxy. So, okay, what's a browser proxy? What's an HTTP proxy?
A man in the middle.
A man in the middle. All right, so the times that you see proxies are often, let's say you go to work for a company, and they say you can't access the internet directly. You have to point your browser at this proxy. Now, usually they'll do what's called a pack file, a proxy autoconfig file, that's served via DHCP. So even when your work computer starts up, it goes out and gets a proxy autoconfig and sets your browser automatically to proxy to the corporate web proxy. You can't go directly to the world. You can only point your browser at that proxy, and that proxy will, on your behalf, go out and do the web queries for you. The reasons for this can be for caching purposes. So if everybody in the company is constantly looking at the same pages, this can be cached at the proxy. That can be done for filtering purposes to stop you from going to certain websites while you're at work. Don't plan your wedding at work or whatever. Stop you from going to Facebook, things like this. There's some complexity because of SSL these days, but I won't go into how that works. Everyone in this class knows how to get around this, by the way, via port forwarding and other trickery. So that's for other people who haven't taken the class. Those are the people who use this proxy at work. Normally, throughout most of your life, you don't use a proxy, I assume. You go to Starbucks, you just use the internet. You go home, you just use the internet. In order to configure a proxy, it depends on what browser and what operating system you're using. Chrome, which is the browser I'm using, doesn't have proxy settings within the browser. It says it just relies on whatever the underlying operating system's proxy settings are. So on this, which is a Mac, I have to go into system settings and set up an HTTP proxy. And just like when you did SOX proxies with Nick Zimmer, our TA, you set an IP address and a port that says, here's your proxy. Now, when you do that to your browser, it means it tells the browser every time a URL is typed in, don't try to go to the internet to that IP address and that port. Instead, go to the proxy on this other port and send what's called a connect message saying, hi, I know you're a proxy, here's where I'm trying to go. I'd like to connect to this place, all right? So I need to tell my browser where the proxy is. Now, Burp, I'm running on what machine? Localhost. So my proxy setting is going to be to localhost. Burp, by default, runs on port 8080. 8080 is the most common port for proxies to run on. It's a high port, so it doesn't need privileges, and it looks like port 80 because it's got 2 of them, right? All right, so I just started this thing. It's written in Java. I don't think it's open source. It's a commercial program. The full version costs lots of money. The free version is free, and it has all that we need for the class. So go get it and install it, or use the one on Kali. All these tabs up here, dashboard, target, proxy, intruder. Intruder is going to be, you know, an active injector of information. We're not going to use any of this except for proxy. Proxy is a function that intercepts communication in both directions. So when my browser sends something out to the World Wide Web, this thing will intercept it. And when the response comes back to my browser, this thing will intercept it. Now, you can turn intercept on or off. If intercept is off, it'll just log the traffic and pass it through. If intercept is on, it'll actually halt the communication here and let me examine it, or if I want to, I can modify it before I forward it on. This is very useful. This lets you molest headers in both directions. This lets you lie about cookies. This lets you lie about your user agent. It lets you lie about your referrer. That's ever something you'd like to do. Anything you'd like to do from the browser to the server or back, you can do it by intercepting here at Burp. Let's do a demo of this. So I've got intercept turned on. And what I now need to do is I need to point my browser at this Burp proxy. So I need to go into the browser and set the proxy parameters to say localhost 8080 is a HTTP proxy. Now once again, on a Mac, I would do this in the system settings, but it's a pain in the butt to constantly open the system settings. It's 5 menus down, and you have to hit accept and activate and blah, 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 blah. So I have an extension, Chrome extension, and it's called Switchy Omega, which is the weirdest word I've ever seen. It used to be called something else, but anyway. Switchy Omega is a widely used, I've used it now for years, including the original version, which is called something else, for Chrome. I think there's one for Firefox as well. And it makes it pretty easy to set up proxies. And then when I want to set a proxy in my browser, I've got Burp, SOX, SSL strip, blah, blah, blah. I have all these options. All I have to do is click on it, and my proxy's set. The way that you configure this extension is, I can take this out actually. You set the protocol, HTTP proxy, localhost 8080, that's it. And give it a name, and I called it Burp. Okay? Apply changes, and now if I set this to Burp, and I go to I don't want SSL, so maybe I'll go to Never SSL. Never SSL is a site that, surprise, surprise, doesn't use SSL ever, right? Since everything's going to SSL, someone in the world thought what you need is a place that's guaranteed to never be SSL, so this is a safe place. Obviously, via proxy, grabbing an SSL handshake is going to be a big mess. Burp will let you man in the middle SSL handshakes as well, but you have to install Burp's certificate on your browser as a trusted root certificate so that it can man in the middle you. Let's not go there right now. None of the level 1, 2, 3, 4 stuff is on SSL. It's all plain HTTP, so you don't have to worry about it. So I went there. Why did it not work?
Intercept was off.
Sorry?
The intercept was off.
Intercept is off.
No, it's on.
So I set localhost 8080 as my proxy. Burp is running on 8080, listening. And I went here and didn't intercept. Okay, this is the thing I posted on general the other day. By default, when you use proxy settings, oftentimes there's a bypass list right here. And by default, it'll have localhost as a bypass, meaning for localhost, don't go through the proxy, just go back to localhost. And I removed it. As you can see, localhost is not listed here on the bypass list. And that used to work. It no longer works as of the most recent version of Chrome. And apparently there's no way around it. So what I had to do is I had to go, this is only relevant if you use Chrome and you're forwarding a port to localhost, which I think all of you are doing the second one. All of you are logging into Blade and using -L to open a port on your local machine. If you want to use Burp, you're going to then set a proxy to localhost 8080. If you're using Chrome, it doesn't work. It's permanently encoded on the bypass list. So what you have to do, or at least the simplest thing that I could find to do, was to go into Etsy hosts and make a new name for localhost.
You can also do on Macs your computer name .local, and that's the same as localhost.
Oh, let's try
And that'll
that.
work. Yeah.
So as you can see, I added the word local.
Just use Firefox.
You can use Firefox. That's a simple solution too, just using Firefox or Safari or something.
Safari might end up doing the same thing with OS X, since it's tied into OS X so deeply. So
Yeah, maybe.
I honestly don't know.
It seems to be a Chrome issue,
Okay.
not a Mac issue. All right, so I should be able to go set this to local instead of localhost. And then it should work. So let's try that. All right, did it grab it? Yes. So notice that my request is now pending. My browser is hung. It's waiting for something to happen. Why? Because Burp has seized the outgoing request, and the request, as we now are very familiar with, says get resource name, HTTP 1.1, host headers mandatory, all the headers, and then a blank line to end. Okay? If I want to, I can modify these. Or I can add a new header. So this is to add a header, click on this button, I can remove a header, and I can modify any of these. I don't know. I can take this word out. And then once I'm done, how do I send this on to the website itself? Forward it. My browser may, by the way, give up eventually if I take too long doing all this stuff. All right, so this lets me grab stuff. Yeah, now that's an SSL site. That's why it's getting upset at me. All right. So I recommend for the homework installing this extension or one like it, and using Burp to grab stuff when you think that would be useful. And when you go back to direct, this goes back to direct connection, there's no proxy. Any questions about that? Flying is useful in this homework. All right. The next thing I want to talk about. I can't remember. I wrote some notes for today. Now, of course, I can't find them. Okay. I want to talk about either Ajax or session management next. Let's do sessions. So this is the next slide deck. And this slide deck is talking about PHP, the language. And I'm going to skip through most of this pretty quickly. I've already talked about the ways of embedding PHP on the server side with these tags. Comments can be either single line with / or C style. Variables start with $. Weird, but that's what it is. $. This is reserved for object contexts. Variables are global. There are special kinds of globals. We saw some before. Get and post are special super globals that allow you to read parameters if they're coming into your server-side script as get parameters or post parameters. I don't think it's important to talk about all the different various data types. Another really weird syntactic thing is the triple equals. Have you ever seen that PHP? That makes you shudder. And equal is liberal and triple equals is strict. And there's even not double equals. Very strange stuff. A lot of the stuff you can just look up. Googling things as you're working on the homework, obviously very useful. If you see a PHP command that you don't understand or syntax you don't understand, just obviously look it up. 5 ways to do arrays. It's kind of a mess. There's echo and print R and printf are the ways of outputting things. This is similar to bash. Single quotes don't expand variables, but double quotes do. It has string length, string post, very familiar looking functions. If statements look a lot like C. There's an else if. It's not like in C, but you can imagine what that does. Various kinds of loops. There's a for each and a while and do and yeah. These are the super globals. There's something called globals that's an array of all of these things together in one giant global array. Server information is here. Get and post we've talked about. Session variables, cookies are available in $_cookie, so your server side can see the cookies that were sent back by the browser. Yeah, and I'm going to skip all this really fun stuff. But I want to talk about PHP session management. So, session management. We talked about sessions a little bit before. The idea of a session is you, on the browser, authenticate yourself to some server. You type in your username and your password. Hopefully that's over SSL. It should be, right? On the server side, some PHP runs. And it receives those username and password probably via post parameters, because get would put them on the URL. And it receives them via post, your username and password, and does what with them? Verifies them how? What's the usual drill?
SQL database.
Okay, so go to an SQL database,
Hash the password.
hash the password, and then look up in a table matching your username to some row, and then matching your hashed password to the hashed value in the same row. If they're equal, it's going to log you in. If not, it's going to say incorrect password. If they're equal, if you're to be logged in, then I, the server, want to establish a session with you. Remember, HTTP does not itself have sessions. It's connectionless. It's completely valid for me as the server to hang up on you, and still, I want to identify you. If you've already logged in, I don't want to make you log in every single time you want to click on a link or take an action, right? I want to have a persistent session. I want to recognize you again. And if you've authenticated with your password and gained all kinds of privileges, like I've stored your credit card number, so I don't want just anybody doing this. I want to make sure it's really you. Then I need to verify that it's you. So the way that I do this is via sessions. And I create a session, typically using cookies. The way, remember, a cookie is something that I, the server, set in your browser, and if you agree, if you're willing, to send me back that same string every single time you talk to me. Not just, I don't request it, automatically, every single request you send me includes a header that regurgitates that cookie back to me every time. So what I'm going to do is once you've authenticated to me, is I'm going to set a cookie with a set-cookie header of my own, my headers, and it's going to be session ID equals, and then some random string. It should be long enough and random enough that no one can guess it. All right? So if I set a session ID that's bad and someone else can guess it, they can hijack your session by just taking over your session ID, right? We talked about this last time. We talked about recognizing the browser more specifically and via fingerprinting and all of that discussion. All right, so the way that you start a session in PHP, you could do this manually in PHP. On the server side, once I verify that you've authenticated yourself to me, I could go off and go, okay, I need to generate a random session ID. Go off and use a random number generator and build something out. Then I need to provide a set cookie header to send it to your browser. So I need to somehow get that into the headers. Then I need to store that locally so that every time you regurgitate the session ID back, I can recognize you. And when I store it locally, I should also store whatever parameters I need to remember about your session. What user level you're at. What was the last book you browsed, so I can make advertising suggestions. Whatever context I want to save along with your session ID, I should store that locally as well. Or, since we're using PHP, I can just call this instead. Start session. That does everything I just said in one function. All right, so let's go look at stateful.php on Razor. So Razor. So let's see, if I want to go to Razor's webs, what do I need to do? I need to use -L. I'm not going to Blade, I'm going to Razor. So let's go SSH Razor -L. It's got a web server running on it. And now my browser should, on port 8088, be able to see. Yeah. And then in my home directory, a bunch of demo stuff. And stateful is here. So stateful says page views equals 1. And I don't think there's anything interesting in the source here. I have no idea why that's not. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, the source is just page views equals 1. There's nothing interesting going on. There's no JavaScript or anything. If I hit refresh, page views goes to 2, and then to 3, and then to 4. So something's going on where every time I load this page, it's incrementing this value. It's somehow maintaining state. So let's go see how this works. Follow what I'm doing? Stateful.php. And here is the server side for this thing that keeps counting. So I run session start. Once again, session start is going to say, when session start runs, it says, did the browser already send me a session ID? If it did, go look up all the session variables and load them into this super global called _session. If not, go generate a session ID and set a cookie in the header that sends it back to the browser to initiate that session, and then create a local variable store called _session that's going to track all of the local variables local to that session that I've created. Follow me? So this does two things. It either resumes an existing session if the browser sent you a session ID, or it creates a new session if not. Okay? Now, if it created a new session, then the superglobal _session will not have a parameter called counter already in it, because you just created a new session, there's no variables. So that won't exist. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to create it and set it to 1. That will set page views equal to 1 down here. If it already existed, then I'm just going to look it up and increment it by 1. In either case, I'm going to take that value and return it in HTML to the browser. Follow? Okay. If I want to reset this back to 0, like it's up to 9, 10. If I come in here tomorrow and click on go to this page, it's going to be 12. Right? It's going to persist. How can I see the cookies?
What would happen if you load the same page in incognito somewhere?
Oh, in incognito, it'll reset to 1, but then doesn't incognito mode, how do you do incognito mode?
Command Shift.
Thank you. 8.8? It should still work though when I go like this, because I think incognito keeps cookies but doesn't store them long term.
Yeah.
So then if I like kill this and go back, it'll go to 1 again. But in a regular browser window, it will be 12, 13, 14, even tomorrow. I mean, unless I set an expiration date on the cookie. If I have the cookie expiring, then it won't. But I don't think there's any expiration date on the cookie. Can we go look at the cookies? Cookie jar? Okay. So what is the name of the cookie for PHP session IDs? PHP ses ID, all caps, one word. And the value that it set for the cookie, this is my session ID. So this is supposed to be hard to guess. Let's see, does it expire? It says it expires with the session. That means if I close the tab, it should reset to 0. Let's try that. Is it down there anywhere? No. Stateful? Huh. Well, maybe I have to close the entire window, but it did say that it was only alive for the session. It's 35 characters long, domain is localhost, yeah. All right, so I should be able, can I kill this cookie
Yeah.
in this window?
There's the X mark over there.
I hit delete, I guess that worked too. So that should reset me to 1 again, right? Because the session's gone. And then it'll increment again as I hit refresh. Okay? Did you get it? Let me ask you this question.
It's when you close the browser.
I have to close the browser. Okay. I don't want to do that because I have all these tabs open. Because I'm a mess. But anyway. All right. So that would go away if I were to close the browser window. Let me ask you a question. Where is this variable being saved? does this variable have to be saved on the server side? This thing called counter. Can it just be? Can it just be in memory
Server side.
on the server side? What happens when the server restarts?
It's gone.
So if I want that to persist over server restarts,
Does it need a database or something?
then I need a database of some kind. Okay, so PHP will persist this over server restarts. And therefore, we need to write these session variables to disk. Now, you can save them in an SQL database, or you can just write them to plain files. And the way that it's configured on Blade, and this is important for one of the levels, is that it's saved on disk. So this is part of the PHP INI. The INI is the name of the initialization file for PHP, where you set options. Session.saveHandler is equal to files. So we're going to save it into files. That means whenever a session is created, all session variables go to a flat file. And it used to use /temp in PHP version 4. We're on PHP version 7 now, so this version 4 is ancient history. And temp is these permissions. In PHP 5, they were in varlib PHP 5. And in PHP 7, which is relevant for us, files are in varlib PHP /7s. The directory is root:root. What does that mean?
Owned by
User and group are both root, so not you. And 1733, so this is RWX WXWT. So what is notably missing here? Read. So you cannot read this directory. That means you cannot ls. That's good, because the names of the files that PHP stores are the session IDs. So the name of the file is the session ID, prefixed by SESS, I think. Let's go look. Let's see, where would this be on Razor? Var, what did I just say it was?
With PHP.
Okay, so I can't see these sessions. But if I do sudo, it's SESS underscore and the actual session ID that holds these session variables. I use sudo there. Why is it good that not everybody on the machine can just ls that directory?
Because then everybody on the machine can get session logs.
That's right. That means anybody on this machine can see the session IDs of everybody else. That's the point of not allowing it, right? Session IDs are private. Oh no, it's not going to tab expand. Let me do this again. All right. I just catted one of these things. So the contents of these files is the name of the variable, the session variable. Why does it say counter? Why is that there? That was the name of the variable in my sample stateful. So this must be a session file corresponding to one of the little page views things in my demo, right? The name of the variable is counter, vertical bar separates it, I is integer type, current value is 8. So somebody reloaded that page 8 times for that session. There should be one that's 12, and there should be another one that's like 1 or 2, or whatever the last thing was. Okay? So if you wanted to, let's say, hijack someone's session, like, I don't know, in the homework maybe, you maybe could get a hold of one of these session ID files if you knew the name. So on Blade, the way that sessions are stored is via files like this, not in an SQL database. And in one of the levels, you're going to want to steal one of these. Okay? So you're looking for that. And note that you can't just go CD to it and get it. You're just going to have to use something more clever than that. All right, any questions about session management? All right. This, by the way, is the reason that Firesheep used to be able to hijack Facebook sessions at Starbucks, is because if the session ID is just a cookie and you can sniff somebody's connection, then you can see their session ID and grab it for yourself and take over their Facebook login. That's why SSL is critical for stopping session hijacking.
So when are these files deleted?
When are they deleted?
Yeah.
There's a cron job. I wonder if I can find it. What's cron?
Schedule jobs.
Scheduled jobs. You can set. There's a cron daemon that comes by and reads the cron tab. Really?
There's other names for it.
There's nothing in the root cron tab. There is a cron job that deletes these every once in a while via a script that first checks to see if they're active, and if not, deletes old ones. Let's see. Well, there's the other one that yeah. I don't remember where the cron job is set, but yeah. Etsy cron d PHP. So apparently at 9 minutes and 39 minutes after the hour, it runs some script called PHP session clean. It says if it exists and it's executable, then run it. And it's written in Bash, and it's apparently complicated. So basically all it's doing is making sure that there's not an active session before it deletes the session. And uses find and then with the delete option to kill all of the files that are ses_star. Okay, anything else on sessions? You wouldn't want these things accumulating over time, right? A mess. All right, the last 10 minutes, let's go talk about Ajax. Anybody know what Ajax is?
Synchronous JavaScript, something.
Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, I think is what it stands for. But what does it do?
So it's like Java. You could have JavaScript running on a page and it makes asynchronous calls to say like an API. So you don't have to like reload the whole page.
Sounds good. All right. So once again, this is slide deck 15, so I skipped 14. And I probably will go back and go through some of this after the break, but I'm trying to get you to the stuff you need most urgently. So, JavaScript lives inside of script tags, yes. It's served by the server into the browser sees the script tag and runs JavaScript. I have a whole bunch of examples that we can go through afterward, but I want to talk about Ajax. So Ajax is a way, as Alex just said, when your JavaScript's running in the browser and it wants to phone home. It wants to make a request back to the server for some additional data. And actually, I don't want to show these slides. I just want to show you a demo because we only have 10 minutes left. But these slides are posted to the web server, to the class website if you want to see them. So I have a demo, and it's on that, on Razor. And I think it's called names.html. All right, so start typing a name in the input field below. This is very exciting. If I type in A, it suggests all of these names as possible ways to complete the word I'm typing. Have you ever seen this? You're typing something and the JavaScript is somehow looking up stuff and updating some part of the web page as you type. Now, one thing it can do is it can just have a list of names in the JavaScript that's local. But what if this list of names is 50 gigabytes large? Why is it impractical to have it as part of the JavaScript?
Then you can send 50 gigabytes to the client.
That's right, you have to send 50 gigabytes of names to the client. So an alternative way to do this is send a small amount of JavaScript, leave the 50 gigabytes over on the server side, and have the JavaScript query for only the pieces of the database it needs that is then sent back over the network and updates, right? So for example, have you ever tried to register a domain name, something.com? You notice that everything's taken, right? There are Ajax-based domain name lookups where you can start typing and it'll tell you that's taken, but here are these other ones you could try .info or something. That's using Ajax. This is using Ajax. So the names that are listed here, are not stored in the JavaScript that's currently running. They're stored on the server side. And as I type, every time I hit a letter, it queries the server to find out which names start with this prefix and sends back those names. With me? All right. So let's look at both the JavaScript that's running here and the PHP that's receiving the JavaScript requests on the other end. So this is going to be Ajax code, and it's kind of messy because that's not that bad. There's some like IE6 backward compatibility stuff you sometimes see in this. It's a mess, but this is not so bad. So what happens? Here's the form that I'm typing into. It's a text form that says first name, and then on key up, what do you think that means? What's the event? The key goes up. When I left my finger off of the key that I'm typing, it runs a JavaScript function called showHint with the value of whatever I've typed thus far. And then this showHint function, which is right here, is going to update the inner HTML of some element called textHint. And textHint is this suggestions field down here. It's going to get updated. So every time I type something, it's going to call this function. This function is going to get information from the server, and then it's going to update this suggestions field down here. And what does this do? It creates this new object called HTTP request. And then on ready state change, when it goes to a 4, which means that responses come back from the server, and the server status is 200. Remember server status numbers? 200 is okay. It means you got a good value. Then it's going to take the response and set it to this value here. And then it does a get to something called getHint.php with a get parameter. Obviously, with a question mark q equals is a get parameter, right? With whatever string was sent to the function as a parameter here is going to be appended to the URL, and it's going to send it. Okay?
What's the ready state? What was that?
Ready state, so you have this object called an HTTP request object, and it's going to always have a state like pending, response is ready. 4 is, I think it means that the answer is available, and you can query it. So you're often just looping based on waiting for this ready state to occur. That means you can go read this value, and it's going to be something that's valid, well-formed. I don't think, no, scratch that. I was going to say you never have to write this, but you do maybe. But you can just cut and paste this from other examples online and so forth if you have to write Ajax. All right, so let's go look at the PHP now. So what's the PHP that we're interested in? What's it called? GetHint.php. It's going to, if you had to guess what this PHP is going to look like, what do you think it's going to look like? What kind of parameters is it going to read? A get parameter. What's the name of that parameter? Q, because that's the query name. So it's going to take in some string called Q out of underscore get, the global, super global. It's going to read that string, it's going to look it up, in a list of data, it's going to be a hard-coded list of names. It's going to find all the names whose prefix match this queue that was sent in. It's going to formulate a concatenated list of all those names, and then it's going to print them. It's just going to send them back. Okay, so let's go look at the PHP. No, it's called getHint, right? All right, so there are all the names, and it's weird, but this is actually building an array in PHP. So I'm saying bracket A equals this, bracket A equals this, and it just appends it to the array. Freaky. This is getting the queue parameter from the URL as a get parameter and setting it to a local variable called $cube. Remember in PHP, variables start with $. Hint is the return value that we're going to be returning back. It defaults to nothing. And here's the PHP code that says lowercase it, the queue that was sent in. Check for anything that has a prefix that starts with the letters so far. And anytime you find a name, dot equals is append. So this is hint equals hint dot a name that was found. If it's blank, set it to the name found. If it's not blank, append it to the thing so far. And if you type in stuff and it's still equal to nothing, then print no suggestion. So I guess if I put in too many things, it's going to output no suggestion. Okay, so there's one level that uses Ajax. There's also level 7, which is a cross-site scripting attack that you can use Ajax if you want. There's other ways to do it. But the rigmarole, the dance here, is on the JavaScript side. You create this object, and then you look for ready state equals to 4. And then you set its action to go to a server-side script, PHP probably, setting parameters on the way over, and then when the state is 4, you get the answer back from the PHP. You can update the DOM, update the page. Okay, that was like 7 different topics today, jumping all over the slides, but that should be enough for all of you to do the first 5 levels. And if I missed something or you have questions, Slack me or Nick, and we'll do what we can. I'll see you in 2 days. We're going to give you the whole hour 15 for the quiz. The quiz is 3 pages long instead of 2 this time, and some of the questions are hard, so I'll give you the full hour and 15. All right.